Here since 1989 when we opened, so welcome to the store if you've not been in before, and some of you have seen a few places over the years. We're super pleased to be able to host an in-person event, and with a crowd this size, it's a challenge, and we just love doing it. So here we are. I don't know if Karina is going to say something.
I'm over here, sorry. I'm
Hey
stuck.
Karina, so from the publisher, Doug McIntyre.
Do you want to come up and say
Are you
something?
going to say something, or am I doing introductions? This is all
You can
improvised, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So we started in 1989 as a sort of, store for psychoanalysts and therapists and everything, so mental health broadly defined, and then branched out when our Good Neighbors Parent books decided pre-COVID to retire. We started on a lot more of the literacy and special needs stuff, and not so many events to go to anymore, so that's a bit of a blessing. And we'd love to have events with local authors, and Farzana has just worked with this publisher, Douglas and McIntyre, to get this going. Obviously I haven't thought about what to say at all. But I know, Karina, if you want to do the introductions, then great. Yeah.
Should be on? You can't see my frightened mouth face, but it's there, very emoji-ish. I won't do the introductions because I wasn't sure I was going to be doing that, but I did want to just say thank you so much for coming out on Winter 2.0 in Toronto. While Douglas and McIntyre, our heart is on the West Coast. We're a West Coast-based publisher. I think with authors like Farzana, one of our ventricles is definitely pumping here in Toronto. And on a personal note, as a book publicist, I love working with authors because they open up avenues to worlds I never would have spent much time thinking about, including self-care. And when I found out we signed Farzana, I was like, oh, Farzana, she writes poetry and she writes fiction. That's great, wonderful. And then I found out she had a real job. I was blown away when I started reading about who she really is. And that is the joy of writing, is that you often only see one side of the person that they are choosing to project through their art, through their words. And Farzana is giving us so many ways into her mind, and I think to a degree her soul, because she really does write with a lot of internal passion. Whatever she's choosing to write, whatever medium she's choosing. And so it's just really an honor to be a part of this purpleness. Joe, were you really going to introduce Judy? And you know what? Farzana's going to introduce Judy and herself.
All right, I'll try.
I'm an introvert.
That's
Done
fine.
it.
Yes.
I'm going to try. Thank you so much. And before I forget, I wanted to just say, if anybody really needs to sit, there are a couple of stools that can be pulled out from under the table back there. So signal to somebody if you need that. This is Judy. This is Judy Rebick. Do I really need to introduce you? I don't think so. What you need to know is that Judy is like the most kick-ass feminist activist I know. And I am so honored that she's here to do this thing with me. And she has a book for sale here as well. What else? What else do I need to say?
Nothing.
Is that good? Okay.
That's enough.
All right. And
I don't know it. I'm 70, almost 79.
Wow.
Pretty good to be called a kick-ass at that age. Not that I could kick my ass, because I couldn't, but I know what you meant. Anyway, I'm supposed to introduce Farzana, but of course you're all friends with Farzana and you know her. But I love Farzana.
Your mic needs to be
I said yes to this because I had problems saying no, as Farzana writes about in her book, but also because I first met Farzana when she was chair of the equity committee in the writers union, and she was amazing, and she's still amazing. She's amazing. Like I thought, Farzana's writing a book about burnout? She knows everything about everything. Like really, Farzana is one of the few people who's a solid, strong activist, willing to stand up to fight for what she believes in, and is also so caring and wants caring for other people and so knowledgeable about relationships and stuff like that. And so, I don't know, you're just so lovely. You really are. Like, you're just an amazing person.
I'm going to start, because I'm going to forget, I want to do a bunch of thank yous, because when my brain gets going, I will forget like the important things I have to say. So can I do a little thank you first?
Of course.
Okay, so I'm kind of going to just read the back page. I'm going to read the back page. Okay, so I am deeply grateful to all the writers and thinkers whose work I've referenced in this book, as well as the hundreds of clients, co-workers, and community members who've taught me everything about self and community care. Many of you are in this room. A huge thanks to beta readers, Sil Hernando, Zach Grant, Jen Basic, Natasha Steer, and Zara Bardai for your encouragement and critical feedback, and a couple of you are in the room too. Thanks to all of the folks at Douglas and McIntyre for having faith in this book. Special thanks to Anna Comfort O'Keefe, Carolyn Skelton, Sitara Ashler Fogo Gulai, Luke Inglis, Colleen Bidner, Karina Everly, so that was Karina, who was speaking earlier. Karina, it might be really inappropriate to ask you this, but from now on, going forward for the rest of my life, can you be my publicist? Please don't ever leave me. Anna Boyer and David Marsh. I'm grateful to live by Lake Ontario on Turtle Island, which is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. Is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. As a settler on stolen land, I call on other settlers to support the Indigenous-led Land Back movement. As always, thanks to all my friends, family, and community who support my writing. I appreciate every little thing you do. And to my partner, Rayanne, who is holding the camera there. There's so much to say to you. Thanks.
Say it.
You are my heart. I'll just say that. Okay, and I would also like to thank Joe for being such a big supporter of this book from the beginning. So Joe didn't mention that when I was thinking about publishing this book, I contacted him to say, like, I don't know the self-help world at all. Who do I send this to? And he sent me a list with links of like so many different publishers, and that was so helpful and warm. Thank you, Nadia, for being here to help sell this book. To Syra and May, I don't know if you encountered them. They were in character. Maybe you'll encounter them just a little bit later on as well. They were the little bit of silly today. I like to have a little bit of silly. And Sil for being the mask person at the door. Thank you for doing that. And to all of you who shared that you were coming here, shared information about the book, all of that. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a little bit to read a bit later.
Oh, you're going to read? That's like, no, read now.
Let's talk a little bit and then I'll read.
Okay. So when I started to read this book, I thought, okay, Farzana wrote this book for me. But now I'm sure. Because from the time I left my house till the time I got here, I did two things, two stories in her book giving me advice came up. Okay, so I'll just tell you the first one. And that is, I had planned to wear a t-shirt and a, like a suit jacket kind of thing, blazer, right? And then I thought I was going to walk, so I thought, well, I'm gonna be cold if I wear that. And Farzana says self-care is important, so I should wear something warm. So I have this like really plush golden brown sweatshirt, okay? And I mean, you know, I know my mother would not be happy if I went out in public in a sweatshirt, but still I was gonna do it because I knew it would keep me warm. And then I saw there was a stain on the sweatshirt, so I couldn't go that far in betraying my mother. But I forgot that I had this sweater, which is perfectly presentable in this situation. Not only that, but we kind of ran that. Oh yeah, the word there. And it's really warm. So thank you for that. I can tell you another one if things slow down later, but we won't. Okay, so other than the fact that you wrote the book for me, why did you write this book? Like, it's like amazing. Farzana wrote a self-help book? I shouldn't say I've never read a self-help book, because I probably have in desperation at one point. But I never thought of it as something that could help me. But this book is amazing. So, like, what made you do it?
Well, you know, I never thought that I would write a self-help book, right? Because, you know, sometimes we can be snobby about certain genres, right? I have read lots of self-help books, but I think of myself more as a contemporary literary fiction writer. And so this was new. But what was going on was I had been compiling all of these various like lessons to share with my clients. And like what happens with a lot of my books is, you know, I get a certain amount together and then I'm like, oh, is this a book? So, you know, you write about 20 pages. But part of the motivation was, you know, and I'll read a little piece about that later on, but I know a lot of helpers, I know a lot of activists, and these are folks that often have a lot of trouble accessing self and community care, even though it's something we preach. And I thought, like, how could I create something really accessible and with lots of bite-sized, you know, easy to read, gentle kinds of nudges in this direction. So that's sort of how it came about.
Oh, wow, it's really quite extraordinary. I'm telling everybody about it. And I love the way you use the term internalized capitalism. Yeah, I thought that was a stroke of genius. Do you want to explain that?
Yeah, so I didn't come up with this term at all. I mean, people talk about it. It's you know, one of the internalized isms, right? So there are ways that we just learn that we and our bodies and our communities are not very important, and we have to prioritize all of the bullshit that capitalism tells us is important, right? And so part of what happens then is it becomes really hard to rest. It really becomes hard to resist things that look like overwhelm and overwork. And it happens in our activist circles as well, where people feel super guilty for taking breaks, and you know, that's not sustainable, right?
So, but it's interesting that I've never heard anybody compare activists and therapists, you know, in terms of their needs, right? So how did you, and your book seems to address both. I mean, I think some more than others in different chapters, but basically both, right?
Yeah.
So how did you, is it because you were that?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. You know, it just kind of made sense that it would apply. And you know, I've seen it so much amongst activists I work with. You know, the needs are so urgent, and there's so much we need to do, and we can get so overwhelmed. And yes, and it's not that different from how a social worker would feel, or a doctor, or a nurse. Our systems are broken, right?
Yeah.
And we're supposed to, you know, try to make the world a better place, and it can feel endless. Yeah.
Yeah. I can really relate to what you call the grand gesture approach to self-care. Like, my ex said to me, like, yeah, when I was complaining about how tired I am all the time now, he said, yeah, the way it used to be is you work, and then you collapse for 2 weeks, right? And that is true. Like, that is totally how I live my life. And you have a name for it, which I'd never heard before, but also,
I made that term up.
did you make that term?
Yeah, so I'm
Very
gonna
good
take credit for
term.
that one.
Okay, good.
But that
Yeah,
was the
but
same for me, right?
Yeah.
I would.
What's the term?
Grand gesture approach.
Grand gesture approach.
To self-care. Like, how it works is you work, and then you have a great vacation, and then you wish that you could, stay on vacation forever, or you go to the spa, but you want to live at the spa, And it's those things are really nice, but they're not sustainable. They're maybe expensive. They're not available, right, on a daily basis.
Yeah. Yeah. But like, I've never heard anybody actually talk about that. I always thought it was my problem. But, yeah, so it's so helpful. Like, and there's a number of things in the book like that. I mean, some of them I've heard before, but in a different way. And so, like, I'm not saying I'm your target audience, but someone like me is sort of very skeptical about a lot of the new psychological information that's out there. And it's sort of a way that, it seems to me the book is a way of delivering that. That's kind of fun and not a huge investment in terms of time, right?
Yeah, because people don't have time, right? That's one of the things that they say is the barrier is, people are really busy, and the other category of people I bring in is caregivers, right? And so many people, there's probably people here in this room that are like sandwich generation, looking after loved ones who are young and old, right? And there isn't a lot of time, but what if you could take a look at this issue for like 2 minutes a day, or alternatively, 10 minutes a week? What if you could do it in small bits?
Yeah, brilliant. You talk about the importance of self-care for activists. But right now it's really hard to prioritize self-care when people are being slaughtered and starved to death in Gaza. And for people who are supporting Israel, they're afraid for their family in Israel. And so it's really hard to sort of say, oh, well, I should, take better care of myself. And I mean, I had this experience myself because I like for the first 2 weeks after October 7th, I acted like I was 35, Like I did everything that I was asked to do, and I'm 78 and I couldn't do it. And I collapsed.
You were always on those trucks with a
on the
mic in your hand, right?
Yeah. I mean, I had to get down on the back of a flatbed truck. That's how dedicated I am, So, at my age, with arthritis in my knees. So, but I'm just saying that I think that time it was worth it to do, because it was important for me to be visible, both as a Jew and a feminist. But I do it all the time when it's not worth it, right? Like it's not necessary, right? And so, how do you prioritize self-care when the world is such a mess, and especially when what you're doing is making a difference?
Yeah, and there's no easy answer to that. I think a lot of us really relate to how maybe we have gone past our limits, and it makes sense, right? Because there's a slaughter happening, and we're going back to our comfortable homes perhaps. And I remember in those early days people were writing quite a bit about how they felt so guilty. We have water, they don't have water, and so on, right? We have food, so it's a tough thing to think about taking care of ourselves and all of that. But then we have to, right? Like one of the things that I was encountering quite a bit, particularly at the beginning, I think it's still happening, but people were talking about it more back then, was that nobody was sleeping, right? Like, see all this, horrific imagery, and then how do you sleep, right? You've got so much cortisol in your system. And early on, I posted a little Instagram video about like a technique to do before you go to bed so that you can get some of that fight-flight energy out of your body. Because we have to sleep. Like if we're gonna take any action, we have to be able to sleep. We have to, right? This is not a race. It's a marathon. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's a really long marathon. Yeah.
And a really hard one right now. Now we're going up like the hill, right? Maybe now is a good time to do reading.
Yeah, I'll do just a quick reading. Anyone wants to follow along? It's page 8 So I'm just going to read a little piece called "Were You Raised to Be a Helper Type?" I was. I know a lot of activists and helper types. Many of my friends do some kind of direct service work with people. Some are community leaders, activists, and volunteers for various organizations and causes. I provide consultation to other counselors and therapists. On the home front, my partner is a primary caregiver to his elderly mom who lives with us, and we're lucky to be in the company of many dedicated personal support workers. What I've learned about activists and helper types is that most of us were inadvertently raised to be in these roles. In other words, the stresses, traumas, or losses we experienced growing up and living in an inequitable society taught us how to be helpers and activists. Chances are that most of us took on these helper roles young, in our families, schools, and neighborhoods. We might have been a family mediator, a friend to the bullied, or a do-gooder in our community. I sold Girl Guide cookies, never missed a Halloween UNICEF collection. Remember when we had to walk around with the cardboard boxes around our neck? Oh. Anyway. And I was my primary school's crossing guard, which appeals to my bossy side. Some of these might have been conscious choices. Others are roles that we fell into due to circumstances beyond our control. Is there feedback coming off of this?
Yeah, a little bit.
Let me use yours, since you.
Maybe just keep them apart. Keep them apart.
Okay, I've turned it off.
Okay.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I was hearing a little thing in my ear. The good news, we probably developed superpowers as empathic listeners, change makers, crisis managers, social justice warriors, or problem solvers. And maybe we reaped direct rewards, such as praise and accolades, or indirect ones, such as feelings of safety, self-esteem boosts, or a sense of purpose from these superpowers. We learned how to direct our care and love in good ways. And the bad news? We probably weren't taught how to metabolize messy feelings or manage boundaries. We may consciously or unconsciously believe that we don't deserve care ourselves. We may feel guilty when we take breaks or put ourselves first. We may be running on autopilot, feeling so tired that self-care feels like another to-do on a long list of tasks. Added on to this are the messages that our inequitable society and structural forces like colonialism, toxic capitalism, patriarchy, homophobia, transphobia, racism, ableism, and ageism may have offered us about work-life balance and caring for ourselves and others. Most of us will take care of others before ourselves. We light up during crises and chaos in our organizations, friend groups, families, and activist circles, but we can't identify our own impending nervous breakdowns. Self-care is way less exciting than saving the world, right? And I come to this with all, like, completely, and there's a lot of personal anecdotes I share in this book where all of this was true for me. I almost titled this book, Things I Wish I'd Been Taught When I Was 10 Years Old, because what if all of us helper types have been taught how to balance our care work with taking care of ourselves and each other? My wish for you is that this book will provide a simple path to help explore your own personal and political story around self-care and community care and identify your boundaries and needs. I hope that all the good energy and love that you bring to the world is balanced with calm, joy, and rest, and that your life is ever so sweet.
It's way over here.
Okay. Thanks, Farzana. So I was going to ask about self-care, because a lot of people on the left. I remember a story that Anahi Dashkar talks about. She organized a meeting at City Hall after 9/11, right? And it was all like City Hall with a lot of people, like 500 people, whatever, lefties, anti-globalization movement people. And she and her friend wanted to talk about the emotional impact it had on them as coming from Muslim families, right? The anti-Muslim racism. And the people in the audience just wanted to talk about action. What are we going to do? How are we going to fight this? How are we going to fight U.S. imperialism? Oh, what are you wasting your time on that for, right? And she was really traumatized by that. And I was in the audience, and I didn't know what to do, right? Like, I recognized what was happening, but I didn't know how to fix it, right? So I'm curious if you have an answer to that. But the other thing I want to say is that it's what started me understanding how little understanding there is on the left, or there was. I mean, I think it's better than it used to be, about emotional issues, about mental health, about the impact of stress, about not just the impact of microaggressions, but the impact of macroaggressions, right? And the emotional side of that. And I think it's one reason why the left is so weak and the right is so strong right now, is because the right is understanding how much people decide things politically from their heart, not from their heads. And so I think your book's a contribution in that way as well, right? Not just to help us to work better, but to help us to understand that it's not just about what's in your head. It's not just about what you think. It's also about what you feel and what your body is feeling, right? And all of that is part of politics. I don't know. I sort of made a speech there, sorry. It's hard for me to get in front of an audience and not make a speech.
It's interesting though that what you're talking about in terms of left and right, right? Like, yeah. So I don't know how to solve that, but I do talk a lot in this book about the body and how we can use our bodies as a guide. So I talk a lot about like the nervous system. So like one of the things where this hit home in a really big way for me was at the very beginning of the COVID outbreak, we had a lot of uncertainty, right? We didn't know how long everything was going to last. I was working with clients who were scared of the same things that I was scared of. There was just a lot of tension in my body, and I really felt it in a very big way. And so one of the things I started doing was because we were doing all of our workouts online, I started doing dance workouts. And I just noticed what a difference it was making for me. Like I was crying while I was doing these dance workouts, feeling better, getting the tension out. And so I think we need to learn about that. We need to use our bodies as a guide. So what is our nervous system saying? There's a model called the window of tolerance or window of capacity model that I talk about in the book. And I think one of the things that we can do as activists or, helping professionals or caregivers is start tuning in to be like, where is my nervous system right now? Maybe do that right now. Maybe I'll make you do that experience. Don't be scared. Don't be scared. Okay, so just tune into your body right now. Plant your feet. Those who are standing, just feel your toes. Just really plant your feet. And take a deep breath and just kind of notice for yourself. Just notice for a second where you are. So perhaps you are what we call hyper aroused. So you're starting to feel maybe anxious or pissed off or a kind of restless energy. Or maybe you're hypo-aroused and you're kind of feeling a bit numb, you're spacing out, you're daydreaming, you're kind of half here. Or maybe you're feeling like another thing. Maybe you're feeling some kind of flow in your body, some creativity, some curiosity, some connection to others. So just kind of notice where you're at, and there's no shame about any place you're in. This is just how our nervous systems work. We can be in any of those states and anywhere in between. But ideally, we want to be down-regulating to that place of flow, or up-regulating if you're feeling spaced out or numb. So we want to be constantly checking in, constantly noticing, constantly asking ourselves, what is going on with our nervous system? Because we're going to make the best impact in our work. We're going to be the most functional, the most effective if we are in that place of flow and creativity and connection and curiosity. Right? So that's one of those things, I think, is, I think that, you know, we probably need to be doing those kinds of exercises before any meeting.
I just want to say, as a fairly empathic person, I don't know if others noticed how the room entirely shifted when we all did that together. And just want to say how, I'm not asking a question, just to be clear, how, like, I'm just making a connection between our well-being and our regulating ourselves and the collective opportunity. So for activism, I just want to echo that. I love how you said that.
Thanks so much. Yeah.
You can make a speech as long as it's
I mean,
short.
No, but you make a really good point, right? Like, things did go kind of still and quiet, yeah.
You wanted me to remind you, did you want to do the book giveaway now?
We've got to do a giveaway.
Oh, okay.
So why don't we get Vivek to ask her question, and then we'll do the giveaway right after that.
One of the things I always want to demystify is the publishing process, especially for like aspiring writers, and you're someone who has like a rich body of work. I've heard rumors that this book deal happened through Twitter. Is that something you feel comfortable with addressing?
The publishing industry is an industry, and it's difficult. It's really difficult. It's a bad place, isn't it? Sometimes, you know. Of course, there's always good people. There's good people, but
It's becoming worse and worse.
it's
really
tough.
rapidly.
So what I've started doing with my last two books is posting kind of tongue-in-cheek social media posts saying, "Hey, I've written this thing. Who wants to publish it?" And Douglas and McIntyre responded on Facebook and said, "We'd love to see it."
Wow.
So within like a couple of weeks, I had a book deal with them. Yeah. And you know, Vivek is the one who taught me everything about social media. And I'm not very good at it still.
Well, you're a lot better than I am.
Congratulations.
Else I know.
Okay, we have a giveaway. Rayanne, do you have the thing? Rayanne was giving out the tickets, so everyone find your tickets, and maybe Rayanne, you can